Here at the Fantasy Headliners, we're kind of like the Burger King of fantasy football channels. You know, our motto is kind of have it your way, right? We have this gigantic menu board, and when you pull up and you're getting ready to talk with us a little bit, it's a bunch of suggestions, right? This is what's best here. These are the things that we think you should do to be highly successful. But in the end, it's your order, it's your team. You got to have it your way. So if you don't want to follow some of the recommendations or the strategies we lay out, we still want to give you as much information as possible because we want you to be successful. We want you to love your meal, even if it doesn't look exactly the way we said it should. So like Burger King, we want you to have it your way. Now, the big difference is we don't have that creepy king dude kind of watching over you all the time. Well, actually, maybe we do. All right, so Burger King may have us there. But anyway, in this video, it's going to be the same thing. Maybe if you don't love that early running back strategy, maybe if you want to get wide receivers early, here are some guys that you can take after the first round and maybe even a little bit later in your draft that are really going to help you out with the fantasy points because they're going to haul in some catches this year.
Yeah. Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with a banger of a video today to talk about some of my must-have pass-catching running backs. Now, these are guys that are going to help you volume-wise in the passing game, okay? And they're must-haves for me because they're going outside of the first round at a pretty decent value for what they're going to bring to the table. So must-have guys like Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Najee, like those guys are going in the first round, all right? I'm not talking about those guys because maybe you want to spend your first round pick on a wide receiver, okay? Maybe you want to spend your first round pick on a guy that's not going to get as many pass catches. So maybe you're looking at a Derrick Henry, a Nick Chubb, a Joe Mixon. Somebody that, yeah, they're going to get some catches here and there, but they're not really going to give you some of that volume in the passing game that you would like to have. So we're going to talk about those guys outside of the first round that I really want on my team this year because I think they're going to be an absolutely solid RB2 behind one of those guys. Or maybe they could be a really good RB1 if you decide to go with a different position to begin with. But in one of the last videos I did where I told you not to do this, all right? And I went through some different strategies that if you go into your draft day with that mindset, you're going to potentially lose right away. I said if we got 1,000 likes on that video, we were going to give away a couple of draft guides, and we knocked it out of the park. So our draft guide winners from my Don't Do This video, Matt Alderman will be the first one up, going running back because there are so many wide receivers going later in the drafts. I could pop off as the season goes on. Greatly appreciate the advice. Won my first league last year because of you guys. Matt, you're going to be getting yourself a 2022 draft guide. Also, KOTJ412. I've been using the RB strategy for years since they're always guaranteed touches. And he goes on to talk about different guys he's hit on later in the draft, which Jake did a video on the other day, which was some really, really great information about hit rates of running backs and wide receivers. So congratulations to Matt and KOTJ. Make sure that you send us an email to info@thefantasyheadliners.com so we can go ahead and get that process for you and make sure that you get your draft guide on release day, which is still scheduled to be the 1st of July. We're days away, ladies and gentlemen, days away. When you guys email us, make sure that you do use the email that's associated with your YouTube account so we can verify it's you. And hey, if you're wanting to get your draft guide, you can go pre-order yours right now at thefantasyheadliners.com. The link is right down below in the description. And if you go purchase your draft guide and then you win with one of these comments, boom, we're going to refund your money. So you get the draft guide no matter what, and you have a chance to get your money back on it. So make sure that you go do that for us. I want to see like 15 pre-orders come in the first day that this video is dropped. So if you haven't pre-ordered yours yet, go do it. Go do it. Maybe if we get like 15 pre-orders, maybe I'll give away a draft guide in the next video or something like that. But ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for us to talk a little bit more about what running backs I am going to target after the first round of your fantasy football drafts that, again, are going to help you out in the pass catching role for you in PPR leagues, half PPR leagues. Again, if you use that first round pick, if you decide to go with a wide receiver, or you go with a running back that maybe just won't get as much pass catches, these are guys that are going to help kind of balance that out a little bit and give you that opportunity. No, number one is going to be Aaron Jones for me. Now, here's the thing. I am not going to go too far in depth with Aaron Jones here, because I know for a fact that Jake is in absolute love with Aaron Jones this year. And even though I just compared him to a creepy king, I want to give him the opportunity to talk more about Aaron Jones when the time comes. He's really going to go into a huge breakdown on him, I believe. But for Aaron Jones, for me, if you take a look at the stats last year, a little bit down in terms of what he has done in previous years in the passing game, just kind of yard-wise. I mean, a couple of years ago, he had 474 yards and 3 touchdowns. The one good thing about this year, though, in 2021, is he really amped up those touchdowns. He went to 6 touchdowns this year, a career high, and receiving touchdowns for him in a season. So last year, his 64 targets was tied for 6th in the league. His 52 receptions was also tied for 6th among running backs. And his 391 receiving yards was 10th among running backs last year. So the big thing about Aaron Jones is that they've lost Davante Adams. They don't have that wide receiver one on their team that they've had since Aaron Jones has come into the league. Every year that Aaron Jones has been there, they've had those guys. They've had guys in the league where you've looked at and said, hey, you know, these are elite pass catchers, guys that are going to take a majority of the targets. We don't have that in Green Bay anymore. Now, I don't want to knock on the guys that they do have too much. That's not fair. They're not here to defend themselves, and I don't really hate them by any means. But you've got Sammy Watkins, who is either there for the first game of the year and no other game, or injured. You've got Allen Lazard, who has been an okay complimentary piece for years, but hasn't really done anything as a wide receiver one. You've got Randall Cobb, he's starting to become a little bit on the older side, not seeing the production from him that we've seen in years past. You spent a second-round pick on Christian Watson. You still have a third-round pick from 2 years ago on Amari Rodgers, but you've got a bunch of role players in my mind. You've got a bunch of guys that could help, and they're going to be decent playmakers, but none of them is going to be an alpha wide receiver. And you do have Robert Tonyan back as well. Big Bob coming back off of that injury from last year. So Aaron Jones, honestly, might be the most elite pass catcher that they have on their team this season. And we know that Aaron Rodgers in years past, when a Davante Adams has been out, he has leaned on Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Jones for some of those games where he's looking for him out of the backfield the entire time. And the great thing about Aaron Jones's pass catching ability is that allows you to put him and A.J. Dillon in the backfield together, because then at that point you have no idea what's going to happen, because both of them can catch passes. Both of them can tote the rock and are dynamic with it. But you put both of those guys in the backfield together, now you got to account for both of them running the football. You got to account for both of them catching the football. And of course, obviously, you'll have the wide receivers out there that you got to keep an eye on as well. Aaron Jones has always been a dynamic playmaker in the passing game. And his yards this past season did go up a little bit. His receptions did go up a little bit. So pretty comparable to the year before. But if he gets back to those 2019 numbers, where we're looking at almost 500 yards receiving, and he keeps the touchdowns as well, then we've got a guy that, as maybe, again, you draft him at the end of the second round as your RB1. Maybe you draft him as your RB2 because you used a first-round pick on a top-end running back. Now you've got a guy that in half PPR and full PPR leagues definitely is going to have a very high ceiling every single week. Love me some Aaron Jones here in 2022. For Leonard Fournette, a lot of people might be shocked about how many catches he got last year and how many targets he had last year. I mean, this dude hauled in 69 receptions on 83 targets. Both of those were for third in the league among running backs, and his 454 receiving yards among running backs was fourth in the league. So Leonard Fournette really had a huge season last year coming out of the backfield as a pass catcher. And again, just like Aaron Jones, you're getting him more towards the end of the second round. So if you're in the middle, like let's say you're drafting kind of in that 4, 5, 6, that 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9, like somewhere in that range, and you get forced in the first round of your draft to really kind of take a wide receiver because you feel like that's where you need to go with it. You do that, and then all of a sudden you've got Leonard Fournette sitting at the end of the second. Even if you've got to move a little bit early and take him kind of mid-second round, now you've got a guy that, as your RB1, we know that he's going to get quite a bit of work in the passing game because he's going to be the guy there. What does Tom Brady love to do? He loves to latch on to his guys. And Leonard Fournette is his guy. He is one of his guys, and there won't possibly be any Chris Godwin, or at least a fully healthy Chris Godwin, to begin the season. So now you're putting Leonard Fournette in a position where he's going to get touches on the ground. We already know that. They're going to be missing one of their top pass catchers and Chris Godwin. So now you've also don't have Rob Gronkowski back either. You've moved on from O.J. Howard. So there's going to be those same targets there for Leonard Fournette. If you would have had Chris Godwin back healthy, if Gronk would have come back and he would have signed a 1-year deal or whatever, then you could have potentially made an argument that some of those 83 targets that we saw Leonard Fournette get last year, they're not necessarily going to be there this year. But those guys are gone. And those are now vacated targets that are going to be available for Leonard Fournette to use. He obviously has his targets from last season. They're going to spread the ball around. They're going to throw the ball. And this is an offense that they always go to it, right? This is an offense that since Tom Brady has been there, they're always keeping that pedal to the floor. They're not really going to get to a point where they say, okay, we're just going to run the football because we've got a 2-score lead. No. They want to be up by 3 runs, or excuse me, they want to be up by 3 scores. They want to be up by 4 scores. Okay, so Leonard Fournette is going to have that same opportunity. And this isn't the first year that he's done that. His last season in Jacksonville, he had 100 targets and he caught 76 of those. So we have seen Leonard Fournette get that type of volume in the game plan before. Now, the one thing that we would love to see is 2 touchdowns from last year. Let's bump those up a little bit. Let's get those more towards maybe 4 or 5. We got 4 or 5 touchdowns. We're adding an extra 12 to 18 fantasy points to his stat line. This is a guy that, you draft at the end of the second round, and you draft potentially maybe as kind of a, like the RB, 12, 13, 14 off the board, kind of depending on how it falls a little bit. You've got a guy that all he's got to do is, keep these numbers up, still stay strong in the running game. Only played in 14 games last year. So if we can get him to maybe 16, we know that these numbers could look a little bit better. We also know that those 812 rushing yards last year could end up going up a little bit. And then if that happens, now we're looking at a guy that could finish as like an RB7. So you've absolutely nailed the value on Leonard Fournette if you get him at the end of your second round, or even if you've got to move early and take him mid-second round. He's a guy that, because of the pass-catching ability and those targets that are going to be available to him this year, he is going to absolutely return on value. And it's not really going to be, there's no doubt in my mind that he's not going to do that. So we get out of the second round. And now we got a guy in the third round that, based on his playmaking ability from last year on the ground, you're not really looking at what he did as a pass catcher. But James Conner last year was actually one of the most efficient pass catching running backs in all of football. He just didn't get the volume because Chase Edmonds was that guy for them. And they also spread the ball around to their talented wide receiver core, which is going to be without DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games. Christian Kirk is now gone as well. And now you have an opportunity for James Conner to make even more of an impact in the passing game because Chase Edmonds is gone. Now, they have brought in Williams to be that backup to James Conner. He can catch passes as well. But 39 targets and 37 receptions, 39 targets, 24th among running backs, 37 receptions, 27th among running backs. But then all of a sudden you take a look at his 380 receiving yards and recognize that was 11th among running backs. He was highly efficient last year. His 94.9 catch percentage out of the backfield was 3rd highest in the league among running backs. His 9.74 yards per target was 1st among the running backs. His 10.27 yards per reception was 4th among running backs. And his 10.62 yards after the catch per reception was 2nd among all running backs. So again, now you find yourself where James Conner has an opportunity to pick up on some of that volume that other guys saw that he didn't get to see last year. And we know James Conner can do that. You know James Conner is a guy that can help on that side of the ball. I mean, in his breakout year in Pittsburgh, I mean, this was a guy that had 71 targets and 55 receptions, 497 yards. He was getting those targets in the passing game. Now, the biggest thing for Conner has been his inability to stay healthy for a full season. 13 games in 18, 10 games in 19, 13 games in 20. Good news is he added a couple more, played 15 games last year. So if we can keep James Conner right around 15 games, he's going to be the lead running back. Those 15 touchdowns probably going to be a little bit hard to duplicate. So maybe we knock those down a little bit. Let's take those down to 11 or 12 touchdowns. And let's say he stays right around 200 rushing attempts. That 3.7 yards per attempt, let's kind of prop that up a little bit. Let's move that towards 4. Now we're going to be looking at about 800 yards on the ground. And now, because again, no DeAndre Hopkins for 6 games, Christian Kirk is now gone. Chase Edmonds is now gone. Now you've got a guy that can help fill some of those vacated targets. Or Chase Edmonds, didn't even mention him. Did I mention Chase Edmonds? Chase Edmonds, of course, gone again. Okay. All of that being said, those vacated targets are going to be there for James Conner. If some of that efficiency comes down, which we all know that when the volume goes up, the efficiency can come down a little bit, but that efficiency comes down a little bit. But let's say he still stays in a decent efficiency zone. Boom. Now you've got a guy again that you draft in the middle of the 3rd round that is going to give you running back 1 numbers in most weeks. So for James Conner, again, he is a guy, let's say you go running back heavy. Let's say you go running back heavy and you're in the middle of your rounds, or let's say you draft kind of that, late first. So you're going to take a pick in the late first, the early second, and then obviously you're going to come back a little bit later on the 3rd, or you come, early in the 1st and you get your whoever you decide to go with, Jonathan Taylor if you got the first pick, or Christian McCaffrey, or whoever you want to go with at the top of the order, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, whatever. Okay, one of those guys at the top of the 1st, and now we come back to the end of the 2nd, and we say, okay, we're going to go with Aaron Jones at the end of the 2nd. Now we're going to go with James Conner at the beginning of the 3rd. That's a pretty darn good start to your draft right there. And now you've got 2, potentially 3 guys that are all going to be helping out in the passing game. And now a guy that, honestly, I'm surprised he's going this late. Cordarrelle Patterson. Now, Cordarrelle Patterson isn't the same type of league winner that we saw last year, where he wasn't being drafted at all. You got him off the waiver wire. He was an excellent addition to your team. And for those of you that had injuries and things of that nature, he really helped you out to carry the ship through the entire season. Now his ADP is in the 8th round. Honestly, he should be like a 6th round pick for me, maybe even 5th. He's not going to get all of that work at the running back position that we saw last year, but I don't think it's going to stop either. I don't think it's just going to stop where they're not going to put him back there. The big thing is we got to get him back into the role that he served more towards the beginning of the season, where he's a weapon. Because as the season went on, he went from being a weapon to being a running back. And what that meant was they started utilizing more as a traditional running back, running the football with him and really limiting him to that. No, give him some touches on the ground, use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield, put him in the slot, put him out wide, put him wherever. Drake London and Kyle Pitts are going to be decent options. But when you got a guy like Marcus Mariota starting, who I don't want to knock him too much because I still think he's a decent NFL quarterback, not nearly as good as what we saw while obviously he was in his college days at Oregon, but he's a decent NFL quarterback. He makes some decent decisions and he can do some good things with his feet and move around. He's going to need that intermediate pass catching role or that guy to throw screens to or to use on some of those slant routes. That's going to be Cordarrelle Patterson. And the great thing about Cordarrelle Patterson is that you can draft him in the 8th round and you, on a lot of platforms, can put him in as a running back or a wide receiver. He qualifies at both positions. I know he does in Fantrax. I know he does on Sleeper. As far as ESPN like Yahoo go, I believe on Yahoo he does as well. So now you got a guy on your team that you can pick and choose where you need to play him if you got buys or injuries. It gives you a lot of flexibility. He's like a utility player in fantasy baseball. If you play fantasy baseball, and you add a guy to your team that maybe they have eligibility at second base and third base and shortstop and outfield or whatever it may be, and you got that guy in your team, it's like, oh man, if there's off days, I can put him in, I can move him around. If guys are injured or whatever it may be, I can get Cordero Patterson is the same thing. He's going to give us some flexibility with our roster. As a running back last year, and again, these numbers are against other running backs. He had 63 targets and 52 receptions. His targets were tied for 8th. His receptions were tied for 6th. His 548 receiving yards were tied for were second among running backs. And he scored 5 touchdowns as well, which was tied for 3rd. But again, it was some of that efficiency that we saw like with James Conner, because he averaged 4.06 average depth of target. That was second in the league among running backs. His 8.70 yards per target was 3rd. And his 10.54 yards per reception was also 3rd. So this was a guy that was making plays all over the field, whether it be coming out of the slot, coming out of the backfield, whatever it was with Cordero Patterson. They were utilizing him in a way that was allowing him to really put together a fantastic season that helped everybody around him, including his fantasy owners. So that's really what we need to get from Cordero Patterson again. But again, if you're drafting him in the 8th round, he's your running back 3 or running back 4, or he's your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. I mean, this is a guy that if you're really going heavy on the running backs and wide receivers to start, this is a guy that is going to be somebody that is either going to be on your bench, going to be in your flex, or to help you really fill out the roster space when you're missing guys. Cordero Patterson is an excellent value all the way in the 8th round. I'm trying to get him as many places as possible, because even if he doesn't put together the same exact numbers as last season, that doesn't matter, because you're not relying on him to be a starter on a consistent basis. You're relying on him to be a guy that is going to help you out. And that's what you need on your team when you start getting into those 8th, 9th, 10th rounds. So, whole lot of information there. My must-have pass catching backs, guys that I'm looking at in the draft that are going after the first round, that are giving me an opportunity to really kind of fill out my roster a little bit and get those pass catchers if I don't get them in the first round. So, you know what I want to do? I mentioned it at the beginning of the video. Like, if we get 15 pre-orders in the first 24 hours that this video is live, I'm going to give away a draft guide. So if we can get 800 likes on this video, okay, hit the like button. If we get 800 likes on this video and we get 15 pre-orders of the draft guide from the time it drops till 24 hours later, then yes, in my next video that I do, well, not my next video because it will come out before 24 hours is done, but in a video coming up next week, I'll give away a draft guide to somebody. So make sure that you do that for me. Again, 800 likes, hit the like button for me. Subscribe here to the Fantasy Headliners if you're new and you haven't been able to check out this content before. Stick around because it is pretty excellent. And in the comments below, let me know, out of the 4 running backs we talked today, taking everything into consideration, their numbers from last year, their opportunity coming up, and their value right now in the draft, who is your must-have guy? Out of these 4 guys, who is the one that you absolutely want to have on your roster? You got to comment down below, because if we do hit those goals, I'll pick somebody that comments to get that draft guide too. But actually, you know what? I'm going to change that up. I'm going to pick somebody who pre-ordered the guy, and I'm going to pick somebody who comments. So I'm going to pick somebody that pre-orders their guide within the first 24 hours, and I'm going to pick someone in the comments that maybe hasn't pre-ordered their guide already. So I'll give away 2. So hit that like button for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on 3rd down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.